time is the substance history is made of, a river that flows unstoppably and without mercy. Time is unchangeable, yet could it be controlled? Could it be forced to change? We've been covering the rise of Islam and the early medieval ages for a long time now. But what if none of the events we covered in those many hours of documentary content actually happened? What if we've been lied to all our lives about the true course of history? Today we're going to discuss and analyze a disproven yet very interesting theory about how 300 years of medieval history were completely fabricated and did not, in fact, happen. We'll first point out that when it comes to geopolitical conquests and imperial ambition, the immense suffering it inflicts on those involved renders it a real evil of the world. However, the interesting elements of it can make for a great game, in the literal sense, and in particular this video is sponsored by Conflict of Nations. It's a free, real-time grand strategy game where you compete with other players for global domination over the modern world. You take a real country into slow-paced, weeks-long games with up to 128 players, using that time to strategize in extreme detail, conduct diplomacy with the other players, develop over 250 research projects, and build over 100 advanced weapon systems like tanks, jets, and nuclear submarines. You'll also handle your economy and population, keep morale high, or use terrifying weapons of mass destruction to cripple your rivals. Since the game is always ongoing, it's great that you can check it on both PC and mobile to stay up to date on any geopolitical developments affecting your plans. Get the game via our link in the description to get an exclusive gift, 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free, but only for the next 30 days, so act now. In our day and age, conspiracy theories are a staple of popular culture. Tinfoil-fueled tall tales that JFK survived his assassination and that world governments conceal alien life are well-known examples of this. Yet most of these theories are about events that happened not so long ago. With that said, in recent memory, many crackpot theorists have also taken the distant past into their crosshairs, fundamentally challenging how we understand not only our history, but our relationship to the passage of time. Case in point, the phantom time hypothesis, a conspiracy theory with origins in the 90s, fabricated by a group of German pseudo-historians and conspiracy theorists. The phantom time hypothesis claims that approximately 300 years have been added to our chronology between 614 and 911 AD, either by accident, by misinterpretation of documents, or by deliberate falsification. Thus, this period, and all events that are supposed to have happened therein, never existed. The implications of this are of course staggering. It would mean that Charlemagne is an invented figure, that the rise of Islam never happened, and that there are 300 years less removed from the fall of the Roman Empire than we imagined. Those who perpetuate this ludicrous assertion claim that the scarcity of archaeological evidence from this ostensibly fictional period is proof that it never happened, while accusing medieval historians who lived from the 11th century onwards, who wrote about that period of history, of basically making stuff up. But why would medieval historians fabricate 300 years worth of history? For the conspiracy theorists, one answer lies in the Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, who reigned from 996 AD to 1002 AD. According to the tinfoilers, Otto III didn't actually live around the start of a new millennium. Instead, Otto wanted to reign in this year because it suited his understanding of Christian millenarianism. So, with the help of his friend Gerbert d'Aurillac, the future Pope Sylvester II, Otto defined a new date in the year 1000 AD. Consequently, chroniclers had to invent 300 years of history to fill up the empty period with tales of great dynasties and kings, in the process inventing a man named Charlemagne, who they wrote as the role model for all rulers. If that wonderful theory hasn't convinced you that the entire history of America's worth of the Middle Ages is fake, there is also a second hypothesis centered on the Byzantine Empire. Allegedly, Emperor Constantine VII, who reigned from 913 AD to 959 AD, organized a complete rewriting of the whole history of Byzantium. Although his motivations are not clear, it could be that the emperor wanted to give more legitimacy to the decaying empire after the fall of Rome. The conspiracy theorists claim that such a rewriting of history is possible because since the year 835 AD, Byzantine monks had been busy copying all the historical records of the empire from old Maiuscula-style manuscripts into the new Minuscula-style manuscripts. With the original manuscript's destruction, the entirety of Byzantine history could well have been fabricated right there in the span of just 2 generations. As colourful as these suppositions can be, however, there is no real proof for both of these hypotheses. What evidence they have includes the questioning of any seemingly anachronistic thing they can find. For instance, they claim that the Palatine Chapel of Aachen, built in a Romanesque style, is very anachronistic for the 10th century, and that it doesn't make sense that a style modelled off classic Roman architecture developed so many centuries after the fall of the Roman Empire. The truth is that since the 7th century, Western cultures aspired to emulate the Roman architecture of the past, slowly innovating through the centuries until the Romanesque style was developed. This is why the Carolingian architecture of the 10th century takes heavy inspiration from Roman basilicas, triumphal arches, and Palatine chapels. Even beyond the Palace of Aachen, a vast amount of other buildings were constructed in Europe during the supposed fabricated 3 centuries, and it's doubtful that all of them were constructed in the 10th century alone. For instance, between 768 and 855 AD, 27 new cathedrals, 417 monastic buildings, and 100 royal residences were built just in the Carolingian Empire. Yet, despite that, this hard archaeological proof is not enough for the tinfoilers, as the German conspiracy theorists erroneously claim that the radiometric and dendrochronological methods of dating, which confirm these buildings were in fact built between the 7th and 10th centuries, are inadequate and ineffective. However, most historians nowadays say that these methods of scientific dating are very reliable and beyond the danger of circular reasoning. Now, although we have debunked some of the theory's main archaeological arguments, we're going to follow with the astronomical evidence against it. If 3 centuries of our history have really been fabricated, then some of the astronomical phenomena that happened before this period of time should have also been distorted. This, however, isn't true. Most of the observations of ancient astronomy, such as solar eclipses and reports of comets, check out with modern calculus and with Chinese records of the era. Although some of the solar eclipses cited by European sources prior to the 7th century are perhaps too vague to entirely disprove the theory, there are 2 confirmed cases that have been dated with enough precision and certainty. The first one is an eclipse, reported by Pliny the Elder in 59 AD, and the second one was acknowledged by Photius in the year 418 AD. The astronomical observations, combined with evidence from dendrochronology, is enough to disprove the phantom time theory and to affirm that the early medieval period indeed happened. Another theory the German conspiracy theorists usually bring up to convince the casual reader of their hypothesis is the famous 10 days out of sync. In 1582 AD, Pope Gregory XIII started the so-called Gregorian calendar, which is basically a corrected version of the old Julian calendar of Julius Caesar. After being used for a long time, the Julian calendar had the problem of no longer corresponding with the current astronomical situation. The difference, according to calculations by Pope Gregory, amounted to 10 days. Here the conspirators claim that it would actually take 1,257 years to produce an error of 10 days, and since Caesar created his calendar in the year 46 BC, there would have been 13 days out of sync until 1582 AD, not only 10, which the Germans used to attribute a span of at least 325 years which have been added to our chronology. In reality, the Gregorian reform was never purported to bring our modern-day calendar in line with the Julian calendar as it had existed at the time of its institution in 45 BC, but as it had existed in 325 AD, the time of the Council of Nicaea, which established a method of determining the date of Easter Sunday by fixing the vernal equinox on March 21st in the Julian calendar. This is why Pope Gregory only counted 10 days of error and not 13, as he had been counting from the year 325 AD and not from the 1st century BC. Another of the conspiracy theory's many weak points is that it mainly concerns Western European history, with a special emphasis on the Carolingian Empire, but it doesn't explain what happens with other places in contact with this region, such as Anglo-Saxon England, Visigothic Spain, the Byzantine Empire, and the Middle East. This, however, does not stop the tinfoilers, who believe that if the thesis of 300 phantom years is right, then it must also be valid for the whole of Eurasian African history for the period between 600 and 900 AD. Of course, all these places did in fact exist, and were doing things during this period, and there is proof of this in each region. Let us begin with Byzantium. Since the 7th century, there is evidence of painted fine porcelain coming from central Greece and Crete, and of glazed white wares being developed in Constantinople in this period. There is also evidence that the Byzantine Empire saw the reintroduction of silver coins, which were not used since the 2nd century. The melting down of church plates, statues and roofs was a result of the economic crisis caused by the Arab invasions, and the introduction of new coin types such as the miliarison during the 8th century. Other found archaeological evidence includes an extensive use of glass, worked bone tools and decorations, ivory icons and plaques, the silver cup of Grand Sufan Sivin of Bulgaria dated to the 9th century, some silver weapons such as the ewer of Zenobius made in Constantinople in the 7th century, and the remains of the Nea Ecclesia, a church built by Emperor Basil the Macedonian. Many of these were found on Amorium, along with carbonized textile fragments dated from the destruction of the city by the Muslim attack of 838 AD. Let us move on now to the Middle East and the rise of Islam, which is also plagued by conspiracy theorists claiming it never happened. For example, some tinfoilers support this stance by pointing out that the 11th century epic called the Shahnameh, which ends with the last Persian king Yazdegerd III, who died in 651 AD, tells nothing about the Islamic conquest of Persia and had no allusions to Islam at all. Moreover, they claim that Parsis, Zarathustra worshippers in India, have been debating their own chronology furiously because messengers from Iran in the 18th century told them that they'd made a mistake in counting the years since the flight from their homeland. Yet the German conspiracy theorists don't stop there, claiming that a thorough examination of the architecture of the Umayyads from 661 until 550 AD displays untypical characteristics for an Islamic dynasty, while also claiming that we can see a painting on a wall from the 8th century allegedly showing the Persian king Khosrow II paying homage to the Umayyad sovereign, although by then this Persian king had been dead for approximately 100 years. The theorists use this to show that the times of Khosrow II and the Umayyads were the same, and that the Muslims had fabricated the conquest of Persia. Yet these are only suppositions, and we're going to cover the main evidence against this theory. For instance, some art historians attribute the weird characteristics of Umayyad architecture to a formative period of Islamic art, as the Muslims took the late antique classical naturalistic tradition of the Mediterranean as their main artistic influence and adapted it to suit the needs of their burgeoning empire. This was also supplemented by the Byzantine and Sasanian architecture found in the places that the Arabs conquered, especially affecting metalwork, textiles, and the depiction of figural motifs. With time, Muslim artists would develop new techniques, forms, and decorative conventions that distinguished their works from earlier ones. Thus, evidence tells us that in the span of 3 centuries, the rising Islamic empire went through a process of adoption of foreign architectural styles, adaptation of these to their own needs, and creation of a new artistic expression that became distinctly Islamic in the 10th century. Moreover, historians argue that the Persian ruler depicted in the 8th century painting of the kings is not confirmed to be Khosrow II, and that the image can be interpreted as a broadly symbolic representation of the defeat of the Sasanian Empire against the Arabs, rather than the depiction of any specific era or king. Furthermore, this image also shows a Byzantine emperor and the King Roderick of Visigothic Iberia, both defeated by Islam, thus giving more credit to it being a representation of the defeated enemies of the Arabs. Speaking of Iberia, there is strong evidence that there was in fact a Muslim presence there during the so-called Phantom Centuries. Although only coins and scant ceramic fragments remain from the early 8th century, since the establishment of the Emirate of Cordoba by Abd al-Rahman I, we can see the birth of a formative period of Hispano-Islamic art and architecture in the region, marked by astonishing mosques and palaces, such as the Great Mosque of Cordoba. It is certain then that we can consider their existence in this period to be true. Let us now move beyond the Middle East to the land of the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. The Chinese Empire of the Tang dynasty still holds considerable weight against the hypothesis of the German conspiracy theorists. We've already stated that Chinese observations of solar eclipses reinforce the point about the strong astronomical evidence. Yet when we add the Middle East to the phantom time equation, we start to see a lot of cracks on it since the year 551 AD. This year marks the first contact between Islam and China through the Battle of Talas, which we've already covered in another video, so don't forget to check it out. Since then, Muslim communities are known to have been present in China, especially in commercial harbours such as Canton and Hangzhou. And from the 9th century onwards, Islamic merchants started to import Chinese ceramics, which were at the core of the Indian Ocean luxury trade at that time. Archaeological finds of Chinese pottery in the Middle East date back to the 8th century, starting with Chinese pottery of the Tang period. Remains of these ceramics have been found in Samarra and Ctesiphon in present-day Iraq, as well as in Nishapur in Persia, including porcelaneous white wares from northern Chinese kilns, celadon glazed stoneware originating in the Yue kilns of northern Zhejiang, and the splashed stoneware of Changsha kilns in Hunan province. In conclusion, we can see that there is strong evidence coming from dendrochronology, astronomical observations, archaeological findings in Byzantium and the Middle East, and from Chinese records and interactions with Islam that allows us to utterly refute the phantom time hypothesis coming from the German conspiracy theorists. Although it is true that there is considerably less archaeological evidence coming from the Dark Ages in comparison with any other era, we cannot deny its existence, the experiences of everyone who lived there, and the events that happened then. In the end, we can only conclude by saying that time is indeed an unstoppable river, as it was in the past, and as it will continue to be so in the future. And thanks again to Conflict of Nations, the real-time grand strategy game for domination of an online world. Get the game via our link in the description to get an exclusive gift, 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free, but only for the next 30 days, so get in there now and fight your way to victory. We've got more videos on medieval history on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.